Hello and welcome. South Africa's mining sector is under pressure from low commodity prices, growing costs, policy uncertainty and labour unrest. We're sitting down with the new Chief Executive of the Chamber of Mines to take a look at the sector. I'm Dumisho Greater and this is Resource Watch. Roger Baxter has just taken over the reins as Chief Executive of South Africa's Chamber of Mines. This at a time when the Chamber is at odds with the government on black economic empowerment credentials of big miners and as the industry is under immense pressure. If that's not enough, gold miners are due to start what is set to be tough wage negotiations. He joins us on Resource Watch today. Roger, thanks so much for your time. It's been about 1 month into your current position as Chief Executive. Would you say that it's been a baptism by fire?
Tamisha, thank you for having me on your show. It's indeed been a privilege and an honour to have been asked to lead the Chamber, in these tumultuous times. A baptism of fire? Maybe not. I've been in the industry for more than 23 years, so I think we engage on the issues in a constructive way, and sometimes we'll deal with things in a particular way as the industry. But it's been interesting so far, but not really a baptism. I think I'm fairly used to the pressure that we have in these types of roles.
So this is not the first time that we've seen the government at odds with the Chamber, would you say? And just explain to us exactly what are you at odds about now?
So I think the big issue is, if you're looking at the mining charter itself, is that government have come up with a perspective on what the performance of the industry has been. From our particular vantage point, we were quite keen to, first of all, have a shared understanding of how you define, or some of the definitions of what progress looks like. So in other words, making sure that we're working from the same fact base. And so there are some differences. We actually agree on more than half of the different components of the charter in terms of the progress that's been made. But I guess a couple of the big issues are around ownership. Mm-hmm. And on the ownership side, even if you look at the DMR's own numbers, 90% of the 400 mining right holders who submitted their details to the DMR have actually achieved the 26% ownership target, BE ownership target that was agreed to in the mining charter way back in 2002. So that's a significant amount of progress. However, they then caveat it by saying that only 20% of the companies comply because only 20% of the companies have broad-based ownership, so not just narrow-based, but employee share ownership schemes and community trusts. Now, for us, that's a big challenge because roughly 80% of the deals that were done pre the 2010 mining charter, the amended mining charter process. Mm-hmm. And so expecting a company that did an empowerment deal in 2008 to then have to re-empower to make it more broad-based, yes, is not our expectation. You normally don't legislate retrospectively. So we've raised these particular concerns. There's different ways of measuring things, and I think it's much more about the interpretation of the measurement. We do think that a significant amount of progress has been made. Our calculations indicate that in the last 12 years, 159 billion rands worth of net value has been transferred to BE shareholders in the industry. More than 7 million people have benefited, more than 44 empowerment companies, mm-hmm, more than 250,000 mine workers have benefited from the process. So we think as the mining sector, we are leading the front from the private sector on empowerment. So
your stance on the once empowered, always empowerment principle is that should stay? Well,
our view is that it's very difficult to expect a company when the BE players have exited because they want to exercise their rights to be a capitalist and to, yes, sell their equity in the company at the right time. Mm-hmm. When they've exited, if the company gets no credit, you have to go back and re-empower. And if you have to keep on going back and re-empowering, you dilute your existing shareholders. Mm-hmm. And so it creates its own set of challenges. So when a company does empower, and it creates this critical mass of empowerment in the rest of the economy, South Africa benefits, even though that empowerment might have moved from mining into banking or into tourism, etc. So we think that this is a critically important issue.
Were you blindsided by the government when they brought out their audit report?
Our expectation was that they were not going to bring out the specific ownership details, but that's water under the bridge. I think we must accept that that's happened. But I think obviously we'll engage constructively with government on the on the specific modalities of interpretational differences, because we're in the same canoe, we're paddling in the same canoe together. Often as different stakeholders in the South African economy, we have this view that we're actually paddling in different canoes. We're in the same canoe. And if the canoe has a hole in it, we don't sit at the back and say, sorry, it's not our problem, we have to fix it.
So discussions are taking place, that's great.
Yes.
We're very great at discussing things. What about action? What time frames have been put in place to say, by this time, there should be, some agreement between government and the DMR about where we stand on these issues?
Sure. I mean, listen, we're not specifically focusing on timeframes right at the moment. We're rather engaging constructively
Just
on
a
the different
correction, I
issues.
mean the Chamber of Mines, my apologies.
So from the Chamber's side, obviously we wouldn't impose a timeframe on government because we can't. But I think engagement is a regular, ongoing issue. So we do engage on a wide range of issues, not just on the mining charter related issues. So obviously this is an important issue, and so we are quite focused on it. But we've got the mining project Phakisa, which is coming up later in the year, and this is this mining lab. That's a very exciting development, and it's about how we work collaboratively to put South Africa's mining sector back on the map, and how do we really increase investment, increase transformation, and take this sector to the next level. And from the Chamber side, we are really excited to be involved in that process, because mining has huge potential in South Africa. The difficulty is the industry is really struggling at the moment. But looking beyond the current short-term challenges, we need to obviously try and position the industry for growth and transformation in the future. But the key issue is investment. Without investment, none of it is possible. So creating that enabling environment which allows investment to really flow will help really boost the industry and obviously all the developmental impacts it has.
I'd like to touch on those priorities a bit later, but let's talk about the pressure points now. Gold negotiations are set to start. The coal sector is also going to be starting with their negotiations there. Are you feeling nervous at all about this? Where are we when it comes to negotiations?
We have a well-established track record of engaging centrally on both the gold and coal fronts. And also on platinum, we've worked hard, to engage, with the various unions that are in those particular areas. It's another negotiating year for gold and coal. We're going to tackle it in a constructive, pragmatic way. We obviously require sustainable solutions, but in practical reality, different components of the sector are under incredible pressure. So if we look at the gold mining sector at the moment, 31% of the gold mining companies are loss-making at current prices. And wage pressure is obviously one component. We could talk about electricity, which is another. Electricity alone for gold has added R1 billion extra cost, the 12.7% increase that's been granted already. And Eskom's asked for another 13% increase to cover the extra fuel costs that they have. So our perspective is, we're going to engage with all the different parties out there, the unions on the wage side, to try and realize pragmatic outcomes. And ultimately, economic pragmatism has to prevail, because it is a tough economic environment. The companies are not simply starting off the wage negotiation process by saying, conditions are tough. Conditions have been tough for the last couple of years.
Yes.
And it's across the board at a global level where we've seen commodity prices all falling. And in South Africa, we've had our own unique pressures in terms of rising costs, particularly electricity, wages, etc. So, tough time.
Roger, can we survive a protracted strike?
Obviously in the gold mining sector is quite different to platinum. In platinum there are inventories that can be processed during a strike process, etc. Whereas in the gold mining sector, the production processes are a little bit closer. So, I think everyone has to work towards not having a strike in the sector, and obviously reaching conclusions which are reasonable to the employees, but also which sustain the viability of the businesses. So, again, my appeal and my perspective is that obviously economic pragmatism has to prevail in this conversation.
Let's look at the sector as a whole. You did say that you still see promise in the mining industry. Where do you see the mining sector in the next couple of years? And being now at the Chamber of Mines as the Chief Executive, what are your priorities and what can we hold you accountable for?
To be sure, I guess the key thing is that South Africa's a land that is blessed with enormous mineral potential. But it's very interesting when people talk about potential, because minerals sitting in the ground represent no potential unless they can be mined in a viable, profitable, sustainable, safe and environmentally friendly manner, and with the proper developmental impacts for the country concerned. So the latent potential is there, and we have to really understand how we can realize that potential over time. In the short term, it's a very tough environment. Costs have risen too quickly, and we've talked about electricity. We've got other risks that are coming here, carbon taxes. I mean, it's remarkable that we're sitting as a country talking about, as the only developing country in the world, talking about a carbon tax when our electricity prices in the last 5 years have already trebled in real terms. And where Eskom is asking for 24% per year for the next 3 years. So it's remarkable that we sit here talking about things like carbon taxes, which is, again, a further unknown, further impost. What are the energy choices that mining has in the short term? That's a simple fact of the matter. So I just like to reflect that there's a lot of potential, but to realize that potential is going to take huge collaborative leadership effort on focusing on the problems and developing plans and solutions to to take the industry forward. So my immediate priorities as CEO, obviously I've been in this game for a while. I've working hard and strong with the CEOs of all the mining companies. We've got a great leadership team amongst the CEOs of the companies. We're engaging the unions, government and others. We think that Project Phakisa is critically important to reposition the industry. So if I was looking at obviously promoting investment and growth in the sector, getting through the short-term challenges, helping to resolve some issues related to the electricity challenges, obviously focusing on how we can get Project Phakisa to really deliver the right sort of results, and how we can maybe position South Africa's mining industry by 2030, where let's have a view that by 2030 this is an industry which has doubled in size, where employment is much more skills intensive, more highly paid over time, and where mining is able to really contribute to sustainable development, continue the journey of transformation, and make South Africa achieve its national development plan targets. I think that's an incredibly interesting way of maybe to look where we'll be in 2030. There's a lot of work that's going to have to take place between now and then, but it's going to have to be collaborative work to get this industry back on its feet.
Roger, thank you so much. Transforming the mining sector leading up to 2030. Thank you so much for coming in, and we will have you back again so you can tell us about the progress. And again, the best of luck with everything, and this huge task that you have ahead of you. Very big thank you to Roger Baxter. Of course, he's the Chief Executive of the Chamber of Mines, and of course, those were his insights and the profile of South Africa's mining sector. Well, that's it for this week's show. Do stay in touch at CNBC Africa, and our hashtag is ResourceWatch.